Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this workshop session of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors. We'll call the meeting to order and ask Mrs. Lindsay if she would lead us, please, in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we proceed to public comment, I would like to announce that prior to this meeting, the Board of Supervisors met in executive session and we discussed a number of personnel matters and some scheduling matters, including the fact that the first meeting for the month of November would fall on Election Day, that Tuesday being Election Day. So the first meeting for the month of November will take place on Wednesday that week rather than Tuesday. So with that, do we have public comment on an item not on the agenda this evening? Yes, sir, please give us your name and address.
I don't think that's on.
Is his microphone on?
I don't think your microphone is on.
How about now?
Better.
There.
Thank you.
Richard Wayne, 2397 Via Toscana in the Tuscan Villas. I'd like to, on behalf of myself and all the residents of the villas, like to thank the Board of Supervisors, George, and all the township staff on the paving of our roads. It was done last week. If you could pass on to your contractors, Penzies and HRG, they did a fabulous job. All the neighbors are thrilled.
Good.
So I just wanted to pass that on. And then one question that has come up is, now that they're paved, is the process for dedication, is that something automatic that transpires?
No, the Board of Supervisors is scheduled to act on the dedication next Tuesday evening. They have to do so by resolution. It's a ministerial action. It takes 2 seconds.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. Would any other member of the public like to address the board on an item not on the agenda this evening? Seeing no additional public comment, we will begin with a discussion with the Friendship Center Operating Board regarding update of the capital replacement plan as we are in the 2019 budgetary process. Mr. Doherty. Is not.
Mr. Chairman, that was my mistake. I thought Jack was going to be able to be here. Jack can't be here. Rachel, Friendship Center Director, is, however, here. Rachel has been the primary preparer of this amendment. The capital replacement plan has been adopted by resolution of the supervisors. That occurred in 2012. And the purpose of that plan is to recognize all the various component parts of the center and assign a life expectancy to those component parts, assign a replacement cost, and then develop what is anticipated to be the annual cost to the center over time to replace those items. With that said, the plan as adopted in 2012 recognized an annual capital equipment replacement cost value of $170,000 per year. Rachel has prepared this amendment. It's the amendment itself is just a listing of the items and the replacement schedule that exists. The plan is also attached as Resolution 1211. So with that, I can tell you that Rachel is here to explain the plan in greater detail and talk about the Friendship Center Operating Board's discussion in regard to the plan.
Good evening, Rachel. Microphone on?
Okay,
There
thank
we
you.
go.
Congratulations, Rachel, on your new position.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm
You might want to
excited.
explain, Mrs. Lindsay, what that is.
Rachel was our acting director for the past 9 months of the Friendship Center, and yesterday she became our director of the Friendship Center. So congratulations.
Thank you. As George had mentioned, the board and I have been doing an educational process to review the items that are going to need to be replaced at the Friendship Center in the next several years. And through that process, we've discovered that we will need to increase the fee of $160,000 to around $181,000 based on the prices going up in different items, as well as the age of the building and the new items that have been added, such as the auto belays for the rock climbing wall. The depreciation would change over 5 years. We never had that before, so we wanted to be proactive and add that in. We also had purchased about 10 years ago our lifting weights for our classes, the heavier dumbbells and whatnot, and discovered that they are starting to wear and tear, and so we've added those items in as well. Some other key point items that we did add were the natatorium doors. We did not expect to be going down in the process, and now we have added the expense of them as well, along with the leisure pool liner. So several of these items increased, but not significantly, and we just wanted to make you aware that we were doing our due diligence to be proactive in this process.
Board members, this is a part of the 2019 budget process. We will prepare this as an amendment to Resolution 1211 for board adoption at a future point in time. And again, the purpose of this is an exercise not only financially but from a facility planning perspective to recognize our ongoing capital needs and to plan for them over time. Are there any questions for staff?
Board members?
I have a question, Rachel. I'm assuming you know the answer, but as you gave on this report of this specific depreciation and the number of years, I'm assuming, and one should never assume anything, but where you give like an 8 or a 10 or a 12 or 14 year life expectancy, that the things that you currently have are somewhere within that current 15 years, and if there are any, I mean, just using one, for example, telephone system, I'm just using that one because I just pulled it off. It's a 20-year life expectancy. I'm assuming that the current telephone system is somewhere currently within the 20 years, and anything that would be at the maximum year would be then budgeted in 2019. Am I correct? I want to
Yes.
interpret it.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Also, board members, although we have a schedule, it's basically an estimate. Sometimes things break down ahead of schedule and have to be replaced. And at other times, something will reach the end of its useful life and still be serviceable, and we will motor forward with that item. So,
Right.
but this is a plan. This is not a document by which you actually issue expenditures. It's a planning document.
But it is good long-term planning.
Any additional questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Any member of the public have any questions or comments? Although we know it, please give us your name and your address.
John Church, 600 Prince Street. I was looking over this, and it initially started out with 2012 numbers. The replacement costs, so I assume they updated them to 2018 cost?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when the Friendship Center was built, it was supposed to be fully self-supporting of itself. Is there any way... It was supposed to be self-supporting from the membership fees. Is there any way for a citizen without a right to know request to find out exactly how much money is going into the Friendship Center that the Friendship Center is not generating? For example, the slide from what I read is $52,000 or $152,000 to be repaired. And that's going to be a Dauphin County block grant, which is money that could go to Wolfersberger Park or one of the other parks or the Coons Park swimming pool. and we're putting the slide second to Heroes Grove when it comes to Dauphin County grant funds. Am I wrong?
What you're talking about, Mr. Trish, is applications submitted by the township. None of those applications have been acted upon by the Dauphin County Commissioners. The Board of Supervisors did prioritize projects from Lower Paxton Township. I believe there were 9 or 10 projects that came from our community. Heroes Grove was the board's #1 project. The replacement or repair of the Friendship Center Auditorium slide was the #2 priority project.
And if I'm not mistaken, the year before, when they came up to the same ratings for the different grants, the Friendship Center was in the top 3 again,
There was no application for the Friendship Center last
and
year.
the year before that. But I mean, what I'm trying to figure out is how much money from the general fund is going into the Friendship Center? Because I know, I attended the meetings, and it was built under the guise that it would be a self-supporting, yes, it was.
No, it was not. I was not on the board when the board decided to build it. However, I was on the board when it was built, and it was never projected to be self-sustaining. There was always going to be a township general fund
Yes,
subsidy.
for the senior citizen portion of it.
No.
Okay,
No.
well, if I'm wrong, I'll stop up this week sometime or next week and either get with Mr. Wolf or somebody and look through the minutes and see if it wasn't supposed to be self-supporting.
You are
Mr.
welcome to do
Trish,
that.
the Friendship Center was built with the premise that it would be self-supporting, that there would be general fund money that would be applied. There's been, from the very beginning, a $100,000 annual contribution to the Friendship Center. That annual contribution was to offset the use of the facility by the Parks and Recreation Department. The Friendship Center is also provided with its $25,000, Rachel, for the Friendship Senior Center.
Correct.
To offset some of the costs that are incurred by the Friendship Center from the Senior Center. In addition, Lower Paxton Township has smoothed the debt of the center. The center is paying for its full debt load, but the time period in which that debt is being paid has been extended from I believe it's 4 more years remaining to about 8 years to 10 years remaining. Those are the funds that are budgeted every year for the Friendship Center.
Well, in other past meetings, when I've came up and questioned expenditures for the Friendship Center, Mr. Wolf, you said to me that that is going to be paid back to the township.
Correct, that's what I just referenced, sir.
Okay, so is there any way that the average citizen can find out just exactly how much money we're spending to be in the friendship business?
All of our financial information is available to you.
And I would
Always
point
has
out, we are having a budget meeting again, the last Tuesday of this month.
Isn't this a question that one of the supervisors should know, or somebody should know?
You asked, sir, your question, sir, was, is the information available? My answer to you is, it's always available to you. It's public information.
Thank you.
Well, it's sort of complicated. It's not just a single one line item. There
It's
are
a
multiple ways in which township and the other monies that Mr. Wolf referenced go to it. So the answer to that question is somewhat complicated.
It's very complicated, and Mr. Trish doesn't identify a point in time. The number actually is different every year. And some years the Friendship Center operates in the black, other years it has operated in the red. So to that being said, if the question isn't specific, I can't give a specific answer.
Right.
Okay. Any other public comment or questions relative to the Friendship Center capital replacement plan, which is what is before us? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now we would like to discuss with the Lower Paxton Township Historical Commission. They want to do a map of historic structures and places, and Joe Murphy is here to come up and tell us what the Lower Paxton Township Historical Commission is interested in doing. Mr. Murphy. Company.
And company. Good evening. I didn't do any of this work. Three people that are worked with the commission, two were members, and one, Pam Valencia, was helped out. Denise actually led what we're going to talk about today, Denise Demler, and then Chrissy Kessler was on the group also. What they did is they researched the historic buildings of Lower Paxton Township. It has to deal with Ordinance 316, which is called the Historical Building Ordinance, and that ordinance covers today only the village of Linglestown. What happens is all the other historical buildings within the township are not protected from being torn down. In the Ordinance 316, it says there can be a map and a list of these buildings, and it can be attached to the ordinance. And one of our first projects was to create this list, to find out where all the buildings were from the 18th and 19th century, and this group went right up to the year 1930 and identified all the early buildings, both homes and barns and other structures that are in the township. I'm going to let Denise just tell you what they went through to get the list, and then I'll come back and cover some of the details.
Yeah, what we did was we went into the Dauphin County Property Information website, and Lower Paxton's broke down into 63 residential and 10 commercial. And we had to search every one of the properties in those areas, which accumulated almost to 18,000 properties in the township. And then we would go down through the page and we would look for structures, the date, and what type of structures were on the properties. There is some further information we have to gather from the deeds from this point, because some of the pictures and stuff will say a 2-story, and in fact it's a 2.5-story on that structure, or they leave out the barn that came along with the property during that time frame. And then once we pick our criteria, then we're going to further investigate what might have been on that property. Like, I can honestly tell you, like right now, I found the 4th Gilchrist School still standing in Lower Paxton Township that was built in the 1800s. And these are the type of things we'd like to further research.
They started, I think it was 18,000?
Almost 18.
18,000. The list is narrowed down to 434 homes, not including Linglestown, and a total of 525, including Linglestown. We kept Linglestown separate because they're already protected. The interesting thing is, on the 18th century buildings, there's only 5 left in the township. 3 of them are actual structures or homes, 2 of them are businesses. Gilchrist House is considered a business, and then Greystone is considered a business. So those 2 were both built in the 1700s. There's a home off Colonial Road, which I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but if you were to just look at the tax document, it would have said the house was built in 1950. It was actually built in 1780s. And it's a brick house that I just got to tour, and it's restored almost completely to the way it was in the 1700s. They've spent a year and a half restoring it back in the 70s. In the 1800s, we actually have 60 structures left, and those are the ones we're most concerned about. They're the ones that are disappearing on us, and they're the ones that this map, which is actually the Lower Paxton GIS map, which they're already using in Amanda's department, and they have taken our list and they have put that onto the map. I don't know if we have a sample of that. No.
No, I have the list, I don't have the map.
Okay. The map itself will allow the people that are working in the department, when somebody comes in with an application, to find the date of the building right away. And if it's on the list, they can then connect them with us, and we would like to talk to them if they want to tear the building down. We're not talking about people that want to paint their building or put a new roof on or put windows in. That's fine. What we're talking about is like what happened to that 1850s farmhouse that just one day totally disappeared. Even if we can't save the building, we might be able to save part of the building.
Yeah, was there no warning that that was about to happen? Like, it was, like, just gone.
Well, they came in and got a permit to have it torn down, but at that point in time, we didn't have the map updated. And people, again, because what dates show up, did not realize it was a very historic building. And the amazing thing is we found out it had a cornerstone. And we would have loved to have had that cornerstone. We tried to track it down, but it was, the people they hired were Amish. They came up, loaded everything up in dumpsters and took it away. So we lost that opportunity. We don't plan on losing another one.
Yeah.
And that's why we want this list. We have attached to the list a letter, and I think that's what you see up here, that would go out to the residents that own these properties. It would just go to the people on our list, just to let them know they're on the list and let them know what we're planning on doing in protecting buildings. And we try to be very clear that, you know, we're not interfering with somebody's right to do what they want with their property. We just want to talk to them. 316 is probably going to be revised next year. So all we want to do is get this list up and running until all the zoning, and they've been talking about everything that's going to be revised in the coming years. And we hope to be involved in 316 when it gets revised. But we feel right now this will give us a stopgap and at least protect what we have left. And we're looking for feedback from the board if there's anything you feel we should do. We are putting a committee together to get historical criteria for each building that comes before us. We want to know exactly the deeds, the true history, who lived in that building. In the case of Gilchrist, it was a Revolutionary War soldier that lived in the building and built the building. So the DAR is interested in that building. There are other buildings in town that have similar history. We just want to get it documented. Any questions?
Joe, are some of these buildings vacant now?
There may be some vacant ones. Some of them are in really bad shape. Some of them the people have restored. There's a farm on the Parkway where it was owned by the first African-American farmer in the early 1900s. And the people that own it today have totally restored the barn and the house. And we're going to do go through it and do pictures of it, and with their permission show it. We have to be very careful, especially with this list. We don't want it to be, out on the internet someplace where people could all of a sudden go looking for these buildings. We want to protect the owners. At the same time, we want to protect the buildings. So we have to be careful. But most of the buildings, and we have to find out which ones are actually vacant, but we know some of them are. Any other questions?
Joe, how receptive do you think the owners will be to you coming to the property and asking questions, looking at it?
Some of them I think are going to be very, very receptive. Some are not.
Right.
And that's why we want to send them the letter. We want to introduce ourselves. We want to see. We put in the letter, if you do not want to be on this list, please let us know. Okay. We also put out there that if somebody wants to be on the list, we'll review the house and see if it should be on the list. There may be a house built in 1945 that belongs on the list. I think we all have to realize that prior to 1955, this was an agricultural farming area, and it wasn't until after that the development really started. But the reason we have the 1900s is that the first developments, Hayden and the Colonial Park. Colonial Park was around 1905, they sold the first lot. And then the Haylen, and I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong, which is next to Colonial Park. Haylen, but it's not spelled the same as the school. They spelled it two different ways. We found them in newspapers.com. They had ads as early as 1899, and they were a development. There was an attorney from 3rd Street in downtown that was selling plots out here. And so some of those houses, if they're still there, would be very historical.
Joe, do you know if the properties get on the list, would that enhance property value or detract from property value?
I don't think it will enhance property value. What I think might do that in the future, one of our plans, once we have criteria done, we would like to offer to the residents to have their house recognized by the commission and have a little plaque put on their house the year it was built and give them the history of their property. The Cumberland County is doing this now. They charge a fee. They research the house. If they pick 3 houses a year, and if that house is picked, they get a little brass plaque that goes by their front door, and they get publicity that it is an historical house, or somebody historical was in that house.
And just so I understand, outside of Lincolnstown, the ordinance doesn't, township has no authority.
Yeah, if somebody comes in and wants their house torn down, okay, there isn't anything we can really do at this point in time other than talk to them. And it isn't, the house may be in such bad shape it has to be torn down, but in this day and age, there's so much recovery going on. There are actual companies that will pay for the windows, pay for the doors, pay for the wood floors because of the historical value of those products. People want brick from the 1800s because they want to match brick that's in their homes. And there's an opportunity there for us.
So, and your plan is the letter's will go out before we do anything with the ordinance.
Yeah, it's going to take a while before we can actually do anything with the ordinance. What we're really looking for is allowing our list to be attached to the ordinance. The ordinance says that you can attach a list. 316 has in it, you can use a map. It actually specifies map. And this list creates the map on the GIS program.
But would we attach it to the ordinance before it applies to the whole township?
Then it would, then if that's attached, then that becomes
The
an...
attaching of the map is what does it. We're not
Yeah.
changing, we don't have to change the language.
No, you don't have to change language because it's already in the ordinance that you can attach a list.
But it just, the ordinance only refers to the village.
Right, but it also says there can be a list of other properties in the village, in the township.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yep.
And the letter does, it's pretty clear, you have to go down a little bit, but it doesn't mean you can't improve your structure anyway. I just want to make sure people know this is something that we're doing to encourage them, and not anything that we're trying to prevent them from
We're
improving.
trying to encourage them to keep their house
Right,
up.
right.
This is what we want to do. In this village, in this township, we have a right to ask people to keep their properties looking proper, and that's all we're asking is they keep them up so they don't get torn down.
So Joe, the list you're talking about would be the years and then the total amount of houses. Is that the,
Right.
okay.
That's,
okay.
it's a spreadsheet divided by years, and then also commercials broken out, and Lingelstown is broken out separate.
But it's not going to have the addresses of the properties.
The list you have has the
I
addresses.
saw that, but that will
Right.
not be in the ordinance.
Doesn't have to be on there.
Okay, well, you had just said that we didn't want people to know where these houses were, so I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure.
The list that you have right now has addresses,
Right.
but if we were to attach it to the ordinance, we could remove the addresses.
Okay.
We can do anything you people want to do, and I think we'd be fine, as long as we have the property number on there, then the map will work.
Okay.
Any other questions? No?
If anybody has any suggestions or anything they'd like us to do, let me know.
Any members of the public have any questions for Mr. Murphy and his obviously very hardworking committee? Thank you for all the effort. I can't imagine the number of hours it takes to scour through those records. So thank you so much for volunteering your time
Thank
to
you.
do that.
Thank you.
You definitely enjoy what you're doing.
Yes, very much.
And it is a monumental task when you're dealing with these people and these residences for their protection of whether they want as you said, and you're right, in Cumberland County, they do identify 3 houses a year. Once you accept that and the plaque goes on your house, then it does become public, but at least until the time that the owner so chooses is extremely important. So I applaud your efforts for protecting that right until the individual owner is ready to give that ascension to do so.
Thank you. Thanks for everything
Thank you
guys
for your
have
efforts.
done
Thank
for
you.
us.
Item number 6 on the agenda, we need to have additional discussion relative to Coons Park Pool, and we have some additional issues there. Mr. Kunkel, welcome.
Thank you. We provided you with a complete financial history of the board, our Coons Pool, and I guess the first thing is, do you have any questions? And he also just gave you tonight a brochure that I developed a month or so ago that describes everything that goes on at Coons Pool.
Very good. So what are the current, now, I know we discussed a number of weeks back some issues.
Right.
And one of those grants
We have-
requests is in.
One of the ramps.
Grant.
Oh, grant.
Yeah.
Uh,
Didn't we have a grant request? Wasn't that
I have
one
a
of the-
grant request in for painting the buildings.
Yes.
I talked about, I was here for a grant hearing. $22,400. It was very interesting to look at the Friendship Center and all the money they're going to be spending after 15, 20 years. Coons Pool's been there 58 years. And we're struggling to keep it going. That's why I'm here to get some money. We have 2 main pools. The one pool, the lap pool, we've spent a lot of time and it's in pretty good shape. Over the years, we've learned how to patch and paint to at least have them last for several more years. And the dive pool, which is a much larger pool and goes down 10 feet, we haven't spent much time on because we were concentrating on the lap pool. Now we have to concentrate on the dive pool because it's in pretty bad shape. We have a large crack that runs through the concrete base, the floor, and we have an estimate for $1,550 to repair the crack. And we have volunteers coming out the next couple of Saturdays. We're planning to get all the patching done or all the other places where all the previous patching and the block and so on has fallen out. And we're going to patch it, and then we'll be ready next spring to be able to paint everything. And what we're using is Dry Lock Extreme, and it requires 2 coats. So that's why we are asking for $1,629 for paint.
Mr. Kunkel, if I can just get this clear. So Coons Pool is on the township property.
Coons Pool is on township property. There's a lease agreement. It's not from the very beginning. I think we saw a lease agreement from the 70s or 80s, George?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just a written agreement. There's no money or anything that transfers. The original board members pooled their own money and paid to have the pool built. So as far as I know, all of the improvements to the property belong to the board, as long as the board exists. The board consists of 7 people, and believe it or not, we do all the work. I won't tell you how many times my wife complains that I'm over to pool working. So, for example, Walter and I do all the labor. We have Eileen Hoover does all the finances.
So you have memberships, as I read in the
Yes.
the financials that you gave us. You have memberships, but then you also are open to the public.
Yes,
And that's
we consider ourselves really the only truly community pool in the area, because we are not on private land, we are on Coons Park land. We must abide by all of the park's rules. And anybody who has $10 can come in and swim. A lot of the other pools, you have to be a member or a guest of a member.
And that's resident or non-resident.
Anybody?
Okay. Do you keep track of how many non-residents use the pool?
No.
No, okay. I had looked at the financials, but I didn't see that.
I read in one of these documents, is there an issue relative to piping that you wanted to have scoped? Or what? Can you
Yes.
explain what you, what
This
situation
past
is?
spring, we had to make some major repairs to our baby pool. And $3,000 worth of repairs, which I did get community donors that paid for it. The 1.5-inch copper line that went from our pump to the baby pool, it was so full of holes that it wouldn't transfer water. And when we dug it up, I mean, it was amazing. It was scary of how deteriorated the copper pipes were because we're running chlorinated water through them. So the question we ask ourselves is, what are the conditions of all the other pipes? Because we have large 6- and 8-inch pipes that go between pools to return the water from the bottom into the filters, and then water that gets pumped out into all the inlets around both pools. So there's a lot of piping, and the majority of it's under concrete. And so we would like to get an idea of the condition of those pipes to know whether it's worth going ahead. I mean, we feel it is. We are losing water in our dive pool, and I believe it has to do with more the patching of the cracks and the other places where the water is leaking. And I'd ask if township could do some photography for us running through the lines. I just mentioned it to Mr. Wolf.
The sewer department may be able to televise some of the lines. 6 inches is getting a little small. The caveat is if we can get into them. But if the board directs, we'll be happy to do so.
If it's possible for us to do it, personally, I think we should, so we can know what we're dealing with. 'Cause I think what we need to get here is a comprehensive list of not only the crack and what's currently needed, but where are we going over the next couple of years, so that we don't do 1 or 2 repairs and then find out that there's some fatal flaw somewhere, and we've spent money on repairs that really won't matter at that point. So if we could try to get some handle on, like we have with community center with capital needs, what you have the crack repair, you have the painting, hopefully the county grant will come through. What's after that? And if we can find out if those pipes are in bad shape, I assume that we're into a major expenditure.
You're basically into ripping out the pools and starting over.
Okay. Well, we should find that out before we get too far along.
And that's all the more reason why we would need to do an assessment, because we don't know whether we're talking minor expenditures or if there are the drain pipes that are going from the filter system to each of the pools, and what that would cost. So, yeah.
I can have Mr. Weaver take care of that.
That would be,
I think that would be an excellent
fantastic,
idea.
George. If we can get an answer to that, and then we can have additional discussion once we
Okay.
know what we're into.
Well, we're hoping to try to get a lot of work done this coming weekend and next weekend. So
Might need your winter
Because-
coat.
it doesn't matter. Better than being out in this humidity. Other repairs that we're looking at, we have the coping around the lap pool. We have a section of it that broke out, and we have an estimate of $575 to repair it. And the board, we're scratching enough money together to pay for that. You took a good look at our budget. You saw that we ended the year without a whole lot of money, and we still have bills to pay through the end of the year until we start getting new memberships. So we don't operate with a lot of money,
No.
and we haven't operated with a lot of money. So
I just had a question on your brochure. The gift cards, are they donated by the hardware store, or do you actually purchase the gift cards?
I think some part of it's donated by Bill, and then the rest of it comes from us.
Okay, I was just curious.
We get a lot of members. in trying to survive, of course, we're advertising the pool, and we've gone on social media, which has been amazing. And
Yeah, because I don't think the other two pools offer like the public that can pay per day. You could come if you came with a
Right.
guest, right?
Right.
So you are the only one. So if you
We're
could
a
get that out there,
true community pool.
yeah. You know, some people don't want to pay the membership because they won't use it, but if they have a hot day and want to go,
And in order to try and survive this, for this past year, 2018, we did raise our rates with about $20 a package, which was the first time we've raised rates in 30 years, I think.
are they comparable to what the other two
Yes.
private pools are?
Comparable to, or a little, usually a little bit less,
Okay.
so.
George, do we have information, do you know, on our website and social media pages about the program?
We, for Coons Pool, we always publish their annual sign-up and rates. We've always given them access to
Yes.
the township's various media sources.
Thank you, thank you. Well, we will look into what we can do as far as televising those lines and then go from there.
I have one quick question. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I did not see, and I'm making an assumption, I don't like to assume anything. You have no reserves, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We are a very weather-related entity.
I understand, I just didn't see it listed anywhere, and I made an assumption. I just don't like to make assumptions.
One of the questions that I received from Dauphin County when we applied for a grant for this year, they said, or asked, could we come up with a, 5-year, 10-year capital campaign like you had here?
Sure.
And no, we can't. I mean, we ended up with less than $2,000, and we need that to pay electric bill, pay on our loan. 2 years ago, we did end up with some extra money, and we bought a pool cleaner and put the shade sails up and did a few minor improvements around the pool. So if we have any money left over, we do put it back into the pool. So,
Did you guys ever have a swim team? Community ever?
the swim team's been there for years, the Piranhas.
Yeah.
Look on the back page.
Do they
Piranhas.
do fundraisers and?
They're going to be doing one this year now. They offer a lot of help. The pool manager is the coach for the Piranhas. And when it comes time to open the pool up or close the pool, the team comes and gets all the stuff out or puts it away. And so they are a help.
Is there still enough support? Is there enough interest and support in the pool to ensure its long-term sustainability? Or is this something that it's going to be a struggle every year to make ends meet?
Well, you saw the numbers. We had 446 individuals. We had 89 family memberships. Now, we also had couple and individual memberships.
I don't know if that's historically, if that's good, or I don't.
That is down a little bit. Because of the rain this past spring, we were 2 weeks late in opening, and that hurt us.
Everyone was.
I know.
In the pool business this summer.
But I'm just asking, my kids have just grown out of the pool phase. So, is there still enough community interest in the pool that you believe it's sustainable in the long run? That's what I'm.
Good question. People say, now with everybody being air conditioned, and TV and video games, the kids are.
That's exactly it.
I know. And I have, one of our board members used to be a lifeguard when she was young, and they used to be shoulder to shoulder in that pool. But then you were there because you didn't have air conditioning at home.
Right.
I mean, that's why we were there with our kids.
That's true. There's a certain amount of generational change going on here, and I hope there's enough.
Well, the one thing that's interesting, there's a gentleman that I know who is a local, well-known lawyer who has donated money to the pool. He helped pay for the $3,000 repair of the baby pool. And the reason he was so happy to donate is he remembers growing up and learning to swim at Coons Pool. I talked to a lot of older people, and they all have,
I took swimming lessons there.
yeah, from the same lady who's giving them now, Edie
Judy
Weisling.
Weasley.
Still giving them.
Can I just ask you, the grant loan, what was that for?
The grant, the last one or the one we're waiting on?
Well, it just says grant loan, 1,000 or 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000.
That replaced all of the pipes in our filter and pump areas. I mean, huge. And big valves. I mean, the valves were like $2,000 a piece.
So you just did that this year?
You did that this past spring.
Okay.
Yes. And we have a grant in place for painting the building, which is in pretty bad shape. It's actually starting to deteriorate. And I already have plans for the following year, a grant to replace the coping around our one pool, which is where we have to repair it for this coming season. And I know that's $18,000. There's nothing cheap on a pool. You saw the list up there.
Okay.
So
I think once we hear back from Mr. Weaver, we can see where we're at.
I'll let you know as soon as he's done.
and you'll,
We'll coordinate with you, yes.
yeah, because I need to let you in.
Any public questions for George? Okay. Thank you, George.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, now we have to continue our discussion regarding development of a stormwater fee, and there are a number of points that we need to consider. Mr. Wolf?
Yes, board members. The number of points begins with Leanne's notes that she has prepared from our stormwater group meetings, which were held on September 25th and September 26th. There were a total of 6 meetings. Leanne can explain who was invited, what occurred, and what questions were asked.
I don't want to go through this whole 3-page document, but I'll give you a quick summary.
Thank you.
Across the 6 meetings, we had apartment complexes. We had the school district was here, among with private schools. So Harrisburg Christian School was here. We had the malls and office parks were invited. Developers were invited. The developers were a great group because they tried to look at it from both sides of the picture, them as moneymakers and also representing the residents that purchased their properties. So they provided a lot of insight that I tried to gather questions that they asked, and then give you a response to how Raftellus responded in the room that day. So Jen and Keith from Raftellus came, did a brief presentation, explained how the fee could potentially be structured, not that there's been any decision on it, but how it could be structured, and then everybody was able to ask their questions of them or of myself, Randy, or George. We were in the room at the same time. So what you see in front of you is 3 pages of questions, answers, the things that were kind of hot topics for them. So as you consider moving forward with this, you know the things that are going to be pressing issues for the community. I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at it, or if there were any that struck you as you didn't understand the way they were worded, or anything that I can speak to more clearly. Just let me know.
I think there was a big concern, Leanne, on the townhouses. That seemed to be a big discussion from what I read.
Yes, townhouses and then condos. How will they be assessed? Will it be just an overall view that the entire complex will be billed, or will each individual resident be billed that $32 or whatever the number ends up being?
Right.
So I'm not sure how that math comes out and how it would be conducted in terms of, are you sending it to a condominium and they're splitting it up? But that was definitely an issue, especially amongst the apartment complex property owners. They had that question too, just to be able to relay that to the people that are in their buildings.
So is Raftellus going to help us with that?
Yes.
To decipher? Okay.
Yes.
Was everybody there, Leanne? We reached out to certain groups. Were all the groups represented? Apartment complex, malls, office parks, churches, hospitals, developers, schools, hotels.
The only one that did not attend was the hospital. So there was representation at every other one in those categories.
How many churches?
There were several. I want to say 6 or 7 churches. And what we did too, Mr. Judd, is we had a sample here that we had the laptop up ready to go, that if you knew your parcel ID number, we could sit there and pull up your property and say your ERUs are X number and give you a rough estimate of what that fee would potentially be for your property. That was very important when it came to the churches because they've never had to pay a tax or a fee before. So that was great to be able to have that interaction. Same with the school district. Several of the schools sent their facility managers in, and we were able to, if not at that moment, within a few days of the meeting, say, here are your ERUs, here's your potential fee that you could be paying, which is great because right now they're in budget time. So they're trying to plan out for next year, which it was a very fitting time to host the meeting because that was helpful for them.
Any other questions on this for Leanne?
I
And
know-
obviously, they're going to want, they showed an interest in credits, and that's something we know.
Right.
I mean, I think our assumption is to kind of keep it simple and then maybe build on it as we go. But I could see an interest in credits for the big property owners.
And this document that was created, obviously based off of those 6 meetings, a very similar document I can create then too after the 29th and 30th, even though you'll be present, to kind of summarize and give you those hot topic things that you can then go through.
On the 29th and 30th, who will be invited to those meetings?
So that's the general public, that's
General
everybody.
public.
So it'll be just like your meeting this evening that's televised, both nights, 7 o'clock in this room. I'm even considering doing a Facebook Live so that people
good.
can see it that way too. There have been several people that say that they can't come. We've set up a stormwater email address that's gone out to people that they can send questions or comments in. We'll compile all that information so that if they can't be in attendance, their voice is still being heard by their comments being sent in, and they'll be distributed to you prior to that meeting.
Great.
Thank you for the summary so that we have feedback too as well and in hard copy. Thank you very much, Leanne, for that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, these draft resolutions, George.
Yes, board members, going through the Phase 1 and Phase 2 studies begins the process that we are looking at in these bullet items tonight. The resolutions provide for the amendment of the Articles of Incorporation of the Lower Paxton Township Authority to add the duty of stormwater facilities. Both the Board of Supervisors and the authority will have to adopt similar resolutions, and then Mr. Stein can explain what happens after the resolutions are adopted.
After the resolutions get adopted, it's a kind of an odd procedure in the Authorities Act to do an amendment to the Articles of Incorporation. Before we actually do anything with the articles, we have to advertise our intent to file them with the Department of State. Interestingly, when we take the articles in, we have to take the proofs of publication and file them with the articles. So you have to kind of do a calculation by looking at a calendar, figuring out, okay, so when will these ads appear? How long will it take me to get the proofs of publication so that I can accurately put the date that the articles are going to be filed in the ad? So it's not extremely difficult. It's just an odd procedure.
Yeah.
They will then get filed with the Department of State along with the proofs of publication. At that point in time, the articles would be deemed amended unless there's some issue that the Department of State finds with the actual document that's filed. But otherwise, the amendment becomes effective at the point that they're filed.
Board members, I request your permission to put this on the agenda for the board's next business meeting, the township's resolution, of course.
Yes. If there's no objection, we'll put it on the agenda. Seeing no objections. So then we also have this draft instrument transferring ownership of the stormwater system to that's a separate.
That's a separate item, board members. After you amend your articles of incorporation, you'll be able to give the authority the stormwater system so it can actually do stormwater maintenance and other stormwater activities. Mr. Stein has prepared the document by which that transfer can occur, and he can explain how it works.
First of all, in the Authorities Act, there's no requirement for any particular type of a document. So my thought always is to keep it simple unless it is required otherwise. Right. The simplest way to do it is by a quitclaim deed, which basically assigns all of the easements and all the stormwater infrastructure owned by the township to the authority. It's a 2-page document, basically. It doesn't really have to be anything much more than that. The reason that it needs to be transferred to the authority is because in order for the authority to bill for this usage of the stormwater system, it has to actually own the system to do that. It's a requirement of the act that they have to. It has to be their facilities that serve for them in order to levy a fee. So that's the reason. That's the reason it's all going to be transferred to the authority.
Okay.
If the authority doesn't agree to accept it, of course, we can drop the whole thing, right?
No.
Don't think that's going to happen.
Much though we might like to drop the whole thing, regrettably, we have federal and state mandates that we must comply with. So then the draft management agreement would be yet a third instrument that we have to adopt?
We have a question from the audience.
Oh, well, okay. I was going to go through everything and then take
Okay.
questions at the end.
The draft board member.
We will get to you, yeah, but
Board members, the management agreement, Lower Paxton Township now has a management agreement with Lower Paxton Township Authority by which it provides for the day-to-day management of the sanitary sewer system through township staff. Of course, the authority provides payment for the township to do that. We have prepared a draft management agreement for the authority and the township to do basically the same thing for stormwater facilities that will be owned by the Lower Paxton Township Authority. This is in draft form. In doing this draft, I found 2 or 3 places where the existing management agreement is actually out of date. And Mr. Weaver has suggested to me that we just combine the 2 into 1 and update the sewer agreement and add in the stormwater agreement at the same time. So this is an initial draft. I wanted you to be aware that the 2 parties have to enter into a management agreement by which the authority will have the township operate the stormwater system.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, just a question for clarification. I'm not sure whether it goes to Mr. Wolf or Mr. Stein. When we do these 3, are there a sequential order here so that it all is in a timely fashion, in an organized and structured manner?
Well, the first thing you have to do is obviously you do the resolutions that Jordan had talked about earlier.
Right.
And then you have to
And
file
the transfer comes
you
second?
have to file the articles of incorporation that gives the authority the ability
To do so.
operate a stormwater system and own one. And then after that would be
The management?
yeah, then you could transfer the ownership after the articles of incorporation.
Okay. I just want to make sure we get them in the right sequence and somewhere along the way. we don't-
George,
you
I
get them in
think
order?
George put these on here, I think, in the order that they'll come.
Oh, okay, good. I just want to make sure that we don't get down the road somewhere and somebody says, we got one out of order and something becomes null and void because. Good, okay.
So the Articles of Incorporation amendment will occur next week, but we cannot take action on the other components of this until they're accepted by the Department of
is-
State. So that would not be on next week's
That
agenda.
is correct.
Okay.
So
And
we'll
even-
wait until the Department of State, either by default or otherwise,
Yeah,
accepts the articles.
And you'll approve these resolutions next week, but the articles won't be filed immediately because we have to advertise them first. And then there's that waiting period where you have to make sure you get all of the proofs of publication back so you can file it all together.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that's why we have counsel.
Yes, we're very grateful for council's expertise in this matter. Now, we also, after all that occurs, then the authority has to have a draft budget, which would then have to mesh with the budgetary process of the township going forward, correct?
Correct. Actually, this becomes probably the most complicated part of the process. And I have 3 quick slides and then a budget and some additional. But board members, what we will have is a budget for a stormwater fund. And the Lower Paxton Township Authority, once it has been chartered to do so, will establish a stormwater enterprise fund, much like it has a sewer enterprise fund. The stormwater fund, and it will have a complete separate budget, will be managed by the township, and there will be a management fee. Now, Lower Paxton Township is compensated for management of the sanitary sewer system, and there are certain costs that are placed against that management fee. 20% of the township costs for my time, the solicitor's time. There's a whole line item of times that are booked against the authority. The authority pays 20% of those costs. For the stormwater fund, I believe it appropriate, and I've selected, this is a number that I picked, the management fee amount would be 5%. As opposed to 20%. And that's based upon the overall size of the operation of the stormwater fund, which is essentially about one third to 1/4 of that of the sanitary sewer fund. So the township will charge the authority certain management fees at the rate of 5%. It's currently charging the authority for management of the sewer department at the rate of 20%. Now, the second part of this, which becomes a little bit more complicated, is that the stormwater fund will be secondary in the Lower Paxton Township Authority's operation to that of the sewer fund. Sewer fund will be primary. All the authority's bills will be paid from the sewer fund, and then the stormwater fund will need to reimburse the sewer fund for its share of those costs. For management services, we expect that the stormwater fund will pay the authority for 20% of the cost of operations of the authority. I.e., it takes multiple personnel, printers, and mailing to mail bills for sanitary sewer service. When the services are combined, 1/5 of the overall operation and money generated by the authority will be for stormwater, so we are incorporating 1/5 or 20% of the cost of those billing services to be paid by the stormwater fund. So in essence, we will have one budget with 3 component parts. Now, when we look at the budget for the township services, there will be the management fee, and I'll get into that in more detail in the numbers. But there will also be direct billing for 3 primary functions performed by the Public Works Department. That will be street sweeping. All labor, materials, and equipment used in street sweeping will be billed directly. All labor, materials, and equipment for leaf waste collection will be billed directly, and all labor, materials, and equipment for stormwater system repairs. When the Public Works Department repairs a stormwater basin, will be billed directly. They won't be included in the management services portion of the budget.
Question.
Yes.
Why would we, in terms of determining what's currently paid by the township's general fund gets moved over to the stormwater fund?
Yes.
Street sweeping and leaf collection, to me, would be something we would do even if we weren't under this mandate?
Street sweeping and leaf collection are primary component parts of our MS4 program. We get credit for them in pollution reduction, and although we would do them and have done them in the past, they are eligible costs for stormwater maintenance.
So by doing the street sweeping and the leaf collection as part of the stormwater program, there's a credit to us that then allows us to not incur other additional costs?
No, it's
No. Okay.
credit to us. It's part of our best management practices for maintaining our facilities, and we're required to do so for stormwater pollution prevention. We don't get additional credit for it, but we have to do it.
But if we didn't do it, we would have difficulty, shall we say?
Correct. We would
Yes.
have difficulty meeting our pollution reduction requirements under the Paxton Creek TMDL and under the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. We have pollution reduction plans for both of those, and part of the component parts of those pollution reduction plans are that we will in part reduce pollution by keeping our streets clean from both leaves, which are an organic material that do cause pollution, and by sweeping solids off the streets as frequently as possible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had always wondered why those particular components were included in there, but thank you for explaining that.
And to add, the township has done those services in the past as a convenience to residents. We're now doing them for a specific pollution reduction purpose that is part of our MS4 program and included as a component part of our plan approved under our submitted for yet approved NPDES permit. Then, to complete what is necessary in our stormwater budget, we will need to have capital funds for undertaking capital improvement projects which are identified in our pollution reduction plans. Next year, board members, I would strongly encourage you to borrow $7 million to be used over 3 years, spending approximately $2 million plus or minus a year on capital improvements. And I would do so at the time you refund the BABS bonds, and you currently have that in schedule. You've entered into a swap arrangement to basically take out those bonds on or before the third quarter of 2019, and that would be a perfect time to also borrow additional new money.
And just for public consumption, what are we going to spend $7 million on?
I will get to that in the budget process.
In the budget
I'll
process,
give you the
okay.
numbers in a minute.
Thank you. I'm jumping ahead.
That's okay. And then, board members, the current plan is for billing for the stormwater fee to begin in the second quarter of 2019, and we bill in arrears, so we will receive 2 quarters worth of fundings for a full year of operation. And even if we did begin billing in the first quarter of the year, I'm sorry, we're going to begin billing in June, the second quarter. We would not have funds available for 3 months. As a result, staff recommends a revenue anticipation loan for operations. That loan to have a term of no more than 5 years and be in the amount of approximately $1.6 million. Now the numbers. And board members, please remember, this is a draft. We've had, I got to say, a difficult time wrapping our hands around all of it, and I am sure that it's not perfect. The format of the budget is set forth like all of our budgets, and this parallels in great regard the Lower Paxton Township sanitary sewer budget. There will be interest income that will be on all revenues received by the authority. We estimate it to be $6,000. And then there will also be interest on a bond. If the board goes and issues the bond, we estimate that to be $12,000. We estimate that the stormwater fee will generate $2.1 million. That stormwater fee is based upon 32,730 equivalent residential units at the rate of $128 per year. And next year we will bill for half of that amount in the calendar fiscal year. So our revenues generated next year will be from the fee $2.1 million. And then the revenue anticipation loan for operations at $500,000 takes total operating revenues for stormwater to $2,612,720. Now comes expenses, and revenues themselves are relatively simple. Expenses, there's the management agreement with the authority. There's an exhibit that management agreement with the township for stormwater services. There's an exhibit which we will get to that breaks down that budget item of $1,068,693. That's the amount that I said is 5% of the township's cost for services rendered to the authority. Then there is the management reimbursement to the sewer authority, sharing its overall cost of operation, the amount that is 20% of the authority's operating costs, or $106,808. The rest of the items in administration are direct bill chargeable to the stormwater fund. There is its audit fees, legal services, office expenses for its specific activities. I can tell you telephone and alarm expenses, two of those items are already, I forgot to take them off. We don't have meters and we don't have pump stations. That item will be amended. There is legal advertising for stormwater activities. There is training and education of staff. The stormwater postage, rent of the stormwater portion of the rent between the authority and the township for office spaces, miscellaneous items, plan review fees, GIS system, permitting, that's our MPDS permits for our stormwater program, and insurance for the stormwater portion of the authority. Operations budget is estimated at this point in time to be $1,416,221. Operations, that's administration operations for the stormwater portion of the budget. Stormwater maintenance and repairs, this is maintenance of the system. This is not capital improvements, estimated at $200,000. And then the electric, natural gas, building maintenance, water service, miscellaneous supplies, computer system, telephone charges are all 5% of the overall cost of the operation in those budget items of the Public Works facility. And we believe 5% of the Public Works operation is dedicated to stormwater activities. That goes along with the lines of small tools, sewer, trash removal, and office equipment. Bringing the operations portion of the budget to $209,650. There is the borrowing and the debt service. Debt service is estimated to be $805,000, bringing our current draft budget with expenditures of a little bit more than $2.4 million, and we had revenues right now at a little bit more than $2.6 million. So essentially we have, in this draft form, a balanced budget for year one for operations. Now to Mr. Henry's earlier question.
Yeah, I was wondering when we're going to get to actually doing something here. It's all
we
it's a lot of administrative overhead.
Yes. And yes, there is. For actually doing something under our capital improvements, of course, there's the engineering fees to engineer the capital improvements. We expect to have a BC2 mini basin project at $1.5 million next year. We have restoration projects as identified in our pollution reduction plans. This is the Chesapeake Bay Pollution Reduction Plan at $590,000, and we have the Paxton Creek TMDL costs at $159,000, bringing our capital expenditures for next year to be $2,289,000.
Can I just interrupt real quick? The BC2 mini basin, was that the one we were going to do this year that didn't go through?
No, this is the that's the actual restoration project, the $590,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's the Stonebridge Apartments.
So where's the BC2?
BC2 mini basin is the sanitary sewer mini basin that is currently under design. It's a $10+ million project that Mr. Weaver will let in the spring of next year. There is in a portion of the township that has a significant amount of stormwater facilities that will be traversed by the sanitary sewer project, and as such, these stormwater facilities also need to be replaced. So the stormwater component of that is currently estimated at $1.5 million.
So for these two, the BC2 mini basin project and the $590,000 in restoration project, these are our lines we're talking
Yes,
about?
these are lines.
Okay.
The BC2 mini basin is hard in the ground lines, catch basins, that sort of thing. The restoration project is more of a stream restoration, stream bank restoration. It won't involve structures. It will involve, as our engineers at HRG have referred to, as hardening of stream banks. And our desired project at this point in time is the one we looked at on road tour. That's the Stonebridge Apartments and the highly degraded and eroded stream channel that runs from Colonial Road through the apartment complex.
And that's something, as we go forward, and I mentioned this before, not just for my purposes, but for the people, township residents who are going to be paying, that they see exactly what we're talking about, what hardware we're talking about, bricks and mortar, if it's stream restoration. I think we have a ways to go as far as educating people on what all this is going for. We know we have no choice but to do it, but I think just as we go forward, we'll get some, be able to explain more what we're actually spending the money on.
And this is very difficult. For instance, board members, there are all sorts of policy issues which I've made assumptions on. The quitclaim deed for the transfer of the system. I assume, board members, you would transfer that basically at $1 consideration. There is a value of that system, and it's multiple millions of dollars. There have been municipal cases where they have done an economic transfer between an authority and a government entity and charged one for the other. I didn't assume that you would want to do that. I didn't think that you were looking to add that fee onto the system, but you have a legal right to recoup the cost of your stormwater facilities if you would desire.
It's all being paid by the same.
Correct.
Yeah, it's
more or
big.
less, so.
Well, and all that would do would be to increase the stormwater fee.
It would increase the
enough.
stormwater fee.
Now, I'm looking at this $2,249,000 as capital projects. That's for 1 year. In year two, are there additional capital projects?
That's why I recommend a $7 million borrowing. And that will, typically when you borrow funds under a general obligation bond, you have a reasonable expectation of spending those funds within 3 years. At $7 million, I believe that provides for roughly $2 to $2.5 million a year of expenditure. It would get you through the 3-year period of time typically allowed or expected under a bond issuance.
And the repayment period for the bond issue is how many years?
We've been using a 20-year repayment schedule.
So we're going to spend money, we're going to fund the capital project over 3 years, but we're going to pay for it over 20.
Correct.
If we hit year 4 and we're required to do additional projects, then what?
This has the sound of the sewer operations because it's very similar, only on a much smaller scale. But as you have with your sewer operations, you continue to borrow to meet your financial and capital obligations. So is it reasonable to expect that you will have continued financial obligations for stormwater? Yes, it is. Will they be to the extent of sanitary sewage? No. Our stormwater system does not compare in size to that of our sanitary sewer system. But our obligations are there, both for the pipe that is in the ground and also for the water quality that is in our streams, and we have a legal obligation to meet them. There will be additional projects after the first 3 years that is expected to be funded, which would be 19, 20, and 21.
So the answer to the question that's been asked, is this fee going to stay at that rate for a long period of time, is perhaps not.
Perhaps not. I can tell you that the financial modeling that has been done to this point in time expects the fee to stay in place at the $128 per ERU level for a 5-year period of time.
5 years. Okay. Board members, any questions of Mr. Wolf? That was thank you, George. That was a very detailed explanation. That was.
And board members, this is in process. We will be working to refine this as we move forward, and we will certainly present it to you again.
Thank you.
George, who came up with all the numbers?
It's been a combination of myself, Alicia, Bill Weaver, with help from Jeff Klein and Tim Hauk.
Wow, it's a lot of work.
I can tell you, it has taken all of us a significant time to wrap our hands around how the accounting for this operation will work. This isn't going to be a freestanding operation. It will be a component part of an existing Lower Paxton Township authority, which will be managed on a day-to-day basis by the Lower Paxton Township local government.
Right.
So financially, this is a complicated undertaking.
And real quick, I don't want to belabor, but after 5 years, what will determine the future, the expenses going forward? Will we have control over that? We'll be able to set
That will be.
or will that be
That will be.
mandated from above?
That will be, yes. You have, we applied last year in September of last year for an MPDS permit, which hasn't been issued yet. But once it is issued, it will have and I'm told it will go back to the date of submission, a 5-year term. We have to then apply for a new NPDES permit at the end of that 5-year period, and that will come with, I am assuming, additional water quality obligations.
Typical government.
Well, we'll deal with that, I guess, 5 years
In
from now.
5
when
years,
that-
we can deal with that.
Any other board member questions?
No.
Questions or comments from the general public?
Just had a couple questions. John Church, 600 Bridge Street. First question is, according to the Authority Incorporation of I'm sorry. The amendment to the Articles of Incorporation, it says that once you approve it and turn it over to the authority, that they have the opportunity to change Section F. And is Section F where the building is? Because right now, from my understanding, the sewer authority, or the Lower Paxton Sewer Authority, is the ones that determine our sewer bill, correct?
Correct.
So,
The short answer to your question is the rate that is billed will be established by the authority.
so then why isn't the authority involved in this new stormwater function? that's
Because they
going
haven't
on?
yet been assigned the function by the Board of Supervisors, because the Board of Supervisors desire to determine the best way to fund the stormwater process. And the board has analyzed whether the establishment of a fee or funding stormwater improvements through taxation which way would be better. And the board has now determined that a fee is a fairer way to pay for our community obligation to stormwater as opposed to municipal taxation.
Okay, Mr. Wolf, I tried my best to understand this, okay? And when I looked at the third or fourth page of Ms. Leanne's dossier of the meeting with the contractors, a lot of those questions in there, in my mind, the way I read it, a lot of those developers and contractors and big facilities automatically think that they're going to get some kind of a decrease. And we haven't made any decision. The meetings for the public, you've only had one, where Mr. Lohman Henry at the beginning said, we'll hold public comment and questions off until the end unless somebody wanted to know why we were there. And the people were there to find out about the stormwater fee and ask questions, but the meeting ran long and no public questions were taken. So now we gotta wait till the 29th and the 30th for the public meetings for the stormwater. Excuse me.
What public meeting? Because we haven't had any public meetings.
Yeah.
You had one public meeting.
We've had a bunch, I know you,
Well,
we've had a
we've-
bunch where the consultant's here and we
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about it, is that what you mean?
No, you had a meeting right here?
Yeah, we
Okay, well, the
never,
Yeah,
consultants.
we've had the
Mr. Henry
consultants in
said that-
to provide us with information.
Okay.
But the public meetings are coming up on, what, the 20?
But I thought that was a
30th.
public meeting too.
well,
29th
those
and
were the
30th.
board meetings in which we discussed it. These meetings we're talking about will just be about.
Okay, so anyway, just to satisfy my
Can you get to a
curio-
point of, do you have a specific question?
Well, yes, my first question is,
Well, okay.
if they change section F, is that going to be for the billing? And that answer the question is in 5 years.
What building? Oh, billing. Oh, billing. Okay. Pardon me, I thought you were saying building.
Once the fee is set by the authority can change it on an annual basis. There's no ability of Lower Paxton Township's Board of Supervisors
in-
to obligate the authority in regard to the fee moving forward.
And that could be in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or 10 years. Okay, that's fine.
Although,
But-
keep in mind, though, that 4 members of the Board of Supervisors also sit on the municipal authority. So it's not like the Board of Supervisors is without a say in what's going to happen.
It's also important to note, Mr. Trish, that any money generated by the fee can only be used for stormwater. It cannot be used for any other activity of the authority or the township.
Okay, I look forward to the meetings. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. Any other public questions or comments? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Tim Murphy. I live at 1524 Pine Hollow Road. A couple comments, a couple questions. My first question is, and basically looking for clarification. All of the documents that were talked about, the resolution authorizing the amendment to the Articles of Incorporation, the transferring of ownership, all of that could have come across as being a bunch of smoke and mirrors, and I don't think it really is, and I think there needs to be a simple explanation given. Am I correct in saying?
There is a simple explanation.
This is done
It's
purely.
what's required by law in order
Can I
to
ask
make
my-
this happen.
Thank you for letting me ask my question. Is this basically being done so that the sewer authority can collect the fees? Isn't that the bottom line? The township doesn't want to be in the collection business?
Well, yes, because in order for the township to be in the collection business, we would have to replicate the system that's already in place with the sewer authority. And therefore, that would dramatically increase administrative costs because we would have to duplicate their efforts. By having the fee collected by the municipal authority becomes another line item on an already existing bill, and it holds administrative costs down.
There's also another reason why you would want to do it. The township's ability to fund stormwater under the provisions of the second-class township code are more limited than what the Lower Paxton Township Authority and its has under its jurisdiction. There's some question on whether or not the NPDES requirements in regard to water quality can actually be a taxable item under the requirements of the second-class township code. And I don't know, Mr. Stein, can you, I'm not saying it very well, are you able to add to that?
I guess I was going to approach it from a different perspective, and that is that the authority's already set up to do the work. The township is not. The township, the authority actually has greater powers, greater flexibility with regard to getting into the stormwater business and actually levying the fee for the construction and maintenance and whatever of the stormwater system. And it also is already set up to do the collection process. That is, if people don't pay. And basically for the sewer customers, they're going to get one bill that has sanitary sewer and also stormwater on the same bill. So instead of issuing 2 bills, issue 1.
Okay, that clarifies what I had assumed. There's a lot of convoluted documents going around there, and I think,
government.
cutting to the chase, that's what
And-
it's all about.
And
Okay,
the thing
that's
with the transfer of the system, under the Authorities Act, it has to be transferred to the authority, otherwise the authority can't bill for it.
Sure, I understand that. Okay.
Typical
great. All right,
government.
Thanks for clarifying that. Another question for you, Mr. Stein. You said that the amendment has to be advertised.
That's correct.
Is there a public meeting also required, or is it just advertising?
It just has to be advertised. What'll happen is both boards, the authority and the township, have to adopt their own separate resolutions to make the articles happen. I'll prepare the articles, and then I have to advertise in the newspaper of general circulation, as well as the Dauphin County Reporter, which is the legal journal in the county. I have to advertise in both of those the date that they are going to be filed, but I have to have the proofs of purchase to take with the articles. So in order to do that, I have to plot out in my head how long of a lead time I have to give to get the ads not only published, but also the proofs of publication back. Otherwise, I can't file them on the right date and have to do all over again.
Okay, so it's purely advertising, though? There's not
Purely
a public
advertising.
comment
There's
period?
no public hearing or anything like that.
Okay, all right, thanks for clarifying that.
Tim, do you understand why we're somewhat frustrated from time to time?
Yeah,
That's why we have good legal counsel.
great. One more point. On the inclusion of the items of street sweeping and leaf collection under the stormwater program of the authority, I understood Mr. Wolf's explanation, and I guess my question is, will we see a corresponding decrease in the public works expenditures next year when the budget comes out?
Well, in order to see such a decrease, you would have to assume that that was the only item in the Public Works budget. One of the situations we find ourselves in is by having to use general fund revenues to cover these costs so far, that has prevented the township from expending the money it needs on things like road paving. And it's my understanding from staff that we are behind in road paving. We aren't paving enough miles per road to keep up. We also have a situation where, if you'll recall, going back 25, 30 years ago, the township underwent considerable growth, and those developments, the developers built and put in the roads, they dedicated them to the township, and now we have to repair and resurface them.
And
So
I understand.
we are behind in those areas, so that money can now be put to getting our road program back on schedule.
Okay, I think you've explained it. That will free up money that's being used for those street sweeping and leaf collection this year. That money will be freed up for other purposes.
Correct.
Or we'll get a tax decrease.
Well, there.
Wishful thinking, right?
Well, actually, what it is doing is preventing a tax increase, because the last thing we want is this fee and a tax hike. That we do not want to do.
I agree.
Absolutely don't want to go there.
I agree. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to piggyback on one of Mr. Murphy's questions, Steve. So the billing will be through the sewer authority. Will you have to write 2 checks or just 1 check?
The thought is a person would write 1 check,
Okay.
and then when it comes to the authority, it'll have to be divided up into the 2 separate accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board or public questions or comments? Well, hopefully we'll see everybody at the public meetings, and we'll try to continue to understand this and move the process forward. That then takes us to a review of the 2019 General Improvement Fund budget, Mr. Wolf.
Board members, this is your capital fund for municipal operations. The General Improvement Fund budget and expenditures for next year is $1.2 million, significantly less than in previous years. Partly because in previous years, stormwater improvements from a capital basis were contained within this budget and were at least $1.5 million, if not more. So in years past, you've looked at $3 or $4 million annual capital improvement budgets in the general improvement fund, but because stormwater has been removed, you're looking at a budget of $1.2 million. The budgeted items are the final payment for a screener and leaf turner at the compost facility. The zoning ordinance amendment, since we have adopted a new comprehensive plan, is now budgeted at $30,000. The compost equipment, the final payment was $84,000. Red Top Road preliminary engineering is budgeted at $187,500. The Friendship Natatorium slide rehabilitation at $154,000. Pavilion cover for Coons Park bocce courts at $104,500. And then various activities for Heroes Grove budgeted at $565,000. Then finally, there's 2 traffic signal projects, flashing signals for fire department signs, and our automated red light enforcement grant for Colonial Road, the adaptive signal system. Both those items total $115,000. Now, board members, that's our budget for expenditures, but our budget for expenditures is very dependent upon revenues that we don't particularly control. The Dauphin County Local Share Program, we have 3 grant applications that are pending, 2 for Heroes Grove, 1 for the Friendship Center slide, and the other for the Coons Park bocce courts. Heroes Grove is also awaiting a Dauphin County tourism grant, and Heroes Grove is waiting a Pennsylvania Commonwealth Finance Authority grant. The automated red light enforcement grant, actually in the amount of $64,000, has been awarded to Lower Paxton Township. That project will move forward and is fully funded. And the engineering for Red Top Road is funded by PennDOT at 95% state and federal with a 5% local match. The Friendship Center Natatorium slide also has received a $23,000 financial contribution from a private source. $5,750 of that will be recognized next year. And then transfer from the general fund, there's the township's share for the Red Top Road project. There's the township's share for the Natatorium slide. There is the township's basically paying for the flashing fire department signals. We have a 20% match to the Colonial Road automated red light enforcement grant program. We will fully fund the zoning ordinance amendment, and we will fully fund the payment for the leaf screener. So board members, that's a capital budget for the Lower Paxton Township municipal operations for 2019 as I see it now. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any board questions?
It'll be significantly lower if some of those grants come through.
Correct.
Let's just hope we get our grant money.
Yeah, the lion's share of this is grant money.
Exactly, so let's hope we get it.
So actually, am I correct in looking at this, that the 192,000 is pretty much the general fund portion of it?
Correct.
The rest would be grants and other contributions.
Correct. We're expecting over $1 million in grants.
Well, let us hope. Any public questions or comments? Okay. With that, we will then move on to a couple of draft ordinances that Mr. Stein has been working on. Mr. Stein, let's first discuss the use of fireworks in the township.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, at the board's direction, I prepared a draft fireworks ordinance to supplement the fireworks law, which, as you know, was amended back in 2017. Mostly with regard, the biggest change was with regard to what's defined as consumer fireworks. And that was the major impetus for this amendment. But the way this ordinance is structured, it's structured to incorporate a number of the provisions that are in the fireworks law. For instance, almost all the definitions that are in this ordinance are in the fireworks law, but they're in there for convenience, so nobody has to sit and try to look at two documents at the same time. Also, the provisions on section 107.3 with regard to permits, those are essentially for display fireworks, which are set off by professional people who do that for a living. And those really are unchanged from what's in the, or virtually unchanged from what's in the Act. Where we get to the most changes would be section 107.5, use of consumer fireworks, which essentially gives us some additional regulations for people setting off consumer fireworks on their own properties. What was added in there were things such as the consumer fireworks can't be set off on any property of the township, which would include, but it's not limited to streets, sidewalks, public parks, and public buildings. It's not specified specifically in the law, so we wanted to beef that up a little bit. Many of these other provisions are already in the law, such as if you're going to set them off on private property, you have to have the express consent of the landowner. Getting into ones that we supplemented into the ordinance, one is that consumer fireworks, you cannot set off consumer fireworks after 11 p.m. prevailing time or before 7 a.m. prevailing time unless otherwise permitted by the township.
Steve, can I just interrupt? I thought we had said 10 o'clock instead of 11.
I don't recall, and these numbers are just put in to,
Okay.
if you want to change the times, it really makes no difference to me.
When we talked about it in workshop before, I'm almost positive we said 10 o'clock.
It could have been.
Okay.
However, at 10 o'clock, like on the 4th of July, when it doesn't get dark until 9:30, almost 10 o'clock.
Well, we got to have an exception for the 4th of July.
And I thought we said New Year's.
New Year's.
Well, the way we've structured this, because it says unless otherwise permitted by the township. The reason for that is I put a permit provision in. So if you want to set off fireworks, you come in and get a permit from the township. And then if you need to have it at a different time, the township could permit that through the permitting process.
Wonder how many people are actually going to do that.
Well, enforcement is
An issue.
a big issue all the way around. So,
Well, and just to remind folks or people who haven't heard about it, we received a lot of complaints. I know I've received a lot of complaints this year. It's the first year where we had a new state fireworks law that allowed more bigger, louder materials to be used. So, this was the first summer to see what the impact would be, and it was a lot of people took advantage of it, and got a lot of complaints. They were just in our township. If you have to be 150 feet away from an occupied structure, which the state law says, and we incorporated it here, and you can't do it on public property like parks, there really is very few places where you can do it legally in the township under state law, the new state law. So with that in mind, this is why we developed this the way we did. I think we do have to talk about the time. I looked at the sunset hours for July and August, and it's about 8:50 in the beginning of July, so a little bit before 9, and then it goes, it gets earlier from there. So I think 10 o'clock is fine.
Yeah, I agree.
11 o'clock, I'll say this, if it's 11 o'clock, it won't really change hardly anything as to what happened this year, unless we have maybe better enforcement. But as far as...
I don't think it's a matter of better enforcement. It's a matter of the means by which you really have to sort of catch them in the act, as it were. Because and somebody has to call the police have to have time to respond, by which point.
And just to reiterate on that, since we're talking about proposed ordinance, the police can't come afterwards and do anything. They have to actually be there and witness it, and it has to be on property where it's prohibited. So people have to call the police when it's happening for them to do anything. But I my gut tells me 11 o'clock is too late. I can't picture anyone having to do that. Since we're not covering display, people get a permit and do the official fireworks. We're not including that. And of course, smaller things, sparklers and all that are not covered by this. I suspect 11 o'clock is too late. I think.
I would agree with you, Chris, because of the residents having small children. I feel that 10 o'clock is plenty. We have a lot of elderly people in our township that they go to bed early. And I think 11 o'clock is way too late. That's just my...
It will be interesting to see how that affects the volume of complaints and calls that come in by having an earlier cutoff.
Well,
time.
do we have any residents that would speak tonight on the issue?
We aren't quite there yet.
Okay, well, I'm just asking, since
Yeah.
we were
Well,
talking
no.
about the time.
Well, we'll get to public comment. I would like Mr. Stein to finish his explanation.
Yeah, the only, I just a couple more things. I also added a provision in, this kind of goes hand in hand with the 150-foot limit from an occupied structure, and that is the minimum size of a property on which you could discharge consumer fireworks would be not less than 1 acre. Gives a buffer area for other property owners so that the fireworks may not end up on somebody else's property after they've discharged.
Which we had a gentleman here before and we were talking about it where, you can be 150 feet away, but if your stuff's going over their house and falling on the property, it doesn't, the 150-foot limit doesn't really help you too much.
And then there's a provision there for applying for a permit. That's the only other thing that I added. And you can do the permit if you want to. I put it in as an idea if in fact you wanted to do that, or you could just merely restrict it to certain days of the year, such as 4th of July, New Year's Eve, Christmas, certain holiday times. There's a number of ways you can go about it. This was just one way.
What happens if it's a 50th wedding anniversary?
Right. See, and that's
That's an adult activity,
and see
and
that-
shut it off at 10 o'clock.
Right, but you'd need a permit for that one.
Exactly.
Steve, if the legislature changes the law, because I think they're working on that right now, I think they realize that this wasn't the best way to go about it. If they change it, would that require us to go back and reevaluate our ordinance?
Perhaps. It depends on what the changes would be and if they would preempt local governments from
Supersede us.
regulating at all.
Thank you.
Any additional? board-
$100 fine.
Yes, that comes right out of the statute.
Any additional board member questions or comments? Any public questions or comments?
And just, not to belabor again, but just, this is the first year. I hate passing new restrictions on anything if you don't have to. But quality of life is one of those things that I think is our job. I definitely don't want to overreact. We're thinking this through, and any more public feedback that folks can offer out there, we really appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, please come to the podium. Name and address, please.
Good evening. Eileen Ziegler, 5825 Mayfair Drive. I agree, 10 o'clock. Where we live on Mayfair, this summer, I didn't know this new law was passed with the fireworks. And I actually went to one of my neighbors because when somebody, I don't know if it was on Tyler or Devonshire or up at Springgate, I don't know where, but somebody was setting things off. And I actually wondered if it was gunshots at first. And I was worried that someone was firing a gun, and it seemed to be every night, every other night for a couple weeks. And it always was starting right around 10 o'clock. And it went on for half an hour, 45 minutes. So then I found out about the fireworks. So I mean, I would go out on my deck in the back and I could see them. So obviously, unless it was up at Springgate, up in the vineyards, I don't think anybody in that area that was legal because of
You're right.
where, we don't have 150 feet.
That's an important thing for folks to understand, that there was a lot of this that could have been nipped in the bud this year, even without us doing anything. People just didn't know. If you call the police right away, they can go and, and take care of it, even no matter what, what time of night.
Yeah, I never called. I just,
People don't like to, I understand.
People don't like it, but that's the only way we're going to have enforcement on this, is if people call when it's occurring. If people don't call, I mean, we can have patrols out, and perhaps public safety could do extra patrols on the holidays where we're likely to have this. But if people don't call and let the police know, we can't enforce.
yeah. Well, I heard from other neighbors, 2 blocks up on Mayfair, that I don't know who was setting off, and I think that was possibly on Raybuck. People were setting off, and as you said, the projectiles were coming over, and they were actually landing on people's decks, and so they were upset. I mean, thank God we had a wet year this year, but if it was dry, we could have had a lot of fires.
So if you could encourage your neighbors to call, we would appreciate it when it's happening.
Steve, is it necessary to actually catch them in the act, or isn't it required that a witness remain?
You would, if you had a reliable witness who was
Right.
credible, then it's possible the police could base it on information provided and use that witness.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Well, that's not, I haven't been telling people that. What does that mean? I mean, what's a credible witness?
Well, if you have somebody that's out somewhere watching these fireworks go off, and it's either after hours or they're obviously on a property that's too small to use them. If that person called the police and the police arrived, even if they ceased the fireworks before the police arrived, this witness could testify, I saw A, B, C, and D. They're shooting off fireworks on a property that they shouldn't, that under the ordinance shouldn't be allowed to shoot them off. They were doing it after 10 o'clock. So you can't have a witness as long as they observed it and they're a credible witness who can testify to what they saw. The police could probably rely on that.
Okay, because I think we didn't say that. We didn't make that clear last time. We were saying you got to catch them in the act. So people need to
Well,
know.
if somebody's and they would have to if the person who's calling doesn't see what's going on, or they can only hear it but they don't know where it is.
No, it has to be a witness. Okay.
Any additional comments, questions? Okay, if not, we'll move that forward.
Well, in the draft ordinance, are we going to put 10 or 11?
10.
10, okay, thank you.
I do believe you're creating an enforcement problem, but we'll go with 10 and see how it works. If it doesn't work, we can revisit.
I will support 10 now, but if we get complaints, I would like to ask it to be reconsidered for 11 o'clock.
Okay, then we also have a draft ordinance prohibiting the feeding of wild animals. Mr. Stein, we have some problems there as well.
Yes, again, at the direction of the board, this ordinance was prepared based upon a model ordinance that was developed by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Game Commission does not appreciate individuals feeding wild animals, and the Game Commission actually encourages municipalities to adopt these ordinances because local enforcement is much easier than the Game Commission enforcement. So what this ordinance does is it would prohibit, unless somebody's licensed to do so, any individual from feeding wild animals, with the exception of small seed-eating birds, squirrels, and chipmunks. And then as far as the birds or the animals that could not be fed under this ordinance, it would be deer, bears, non-domestic canines or felines, which would include feral cats, rabbits, skunks, raccoons, large birds, geese, turkeys. Anything that's wild could not be fed under this ordinance. The only thing the ordinance needs is needs some kind of a penalty provision that we'd have to levy. I don't know what. I'm not exactly sure yet whether it would be under a summary offense or a civil civil enforcement.
Actually, Mr. Stein, I believe, section 68.6 is the.
Oh, is the penalty
Yeah, there's
provision
already
already in that?
penalty
Okay.
provision there.
Okay.
And I believe it's summary offense.
Okay.
No way to include all birds in that, huh?
Hey, we got a bird feeder
I keep
now,
trying,
you
keep
know?
trying.
Well, and just again, this is something that I really do not like putting prohibitions out there. I don't like restricting things. I like doing basic, get out there, arrest the criminals, take care of the serious crimes. But these are things we've heard about. These are quality of life things where people feed the deer and they come and eat up everybody's garden. And feral cats is a problem as well. And if you happen to be living in an area where someone's feeding and your property's being damaged, it is a real quality of life problem. And basically, they've been told for years, sorry, there's nothing we can do. And maybe this will help make an impact and give people the property back.
Well, we do need to get a grip on this feral cat issue. We've had several people who have come to our meetings and who have called us. And part of the problem is people are feeding the feral cats, which then cause them to congregate and they ruin their neighbor's property, make the property unusable, and frankly create a health hazard. So this would put some teeth and give us an ability to hopefully begin to take some steps to help those folks. Any questions, comments? Public questions? Yes.
My name's Dana Henney. I live at 2178 Winston Road, and I'm one of the people that have been affected, and I want to applaud the board for finally doing something. I came before you all several years ago when I moved into my property. I took all of your suggestions to heart. I tried repellents, the liquid, the sonar radar things. I spent $8,000 on a fence.
Oh.
I got 2 puppies. Nothing that I have done has worked. I mowed my grass today, and I had put grass seed and some hay down last week, seeding, getting ready, and lo and behold, today when I'm going through the yard, it's a mess because I have cat feces everywhere. I spent $1,200 last fall having my roof repaired because the cats are now getting on my roof and they're using it as a scratch pad.
On your roof?
How do they get
On
on the
my
roof?
roof.
How do they get up?
They climbed up a lavender bush
Uh-huh.
that was on the corner post of my home, which has since been cut to the ground. I had flashing and I kept having a leak and we couldn't figure it out why this was happening. Well, they got up there and he brought me the shingles down that were shredded. There are between 40 and 45 cats at my neighbor's. This has been, I've been working with Nick, I've been sending him photos, so I just want to applaud you all for finally trying to do something about this. I've gone to the neighbor, I have pleaded, begged, asked, please stop feeding them. I've basically was told, don't come on my property. This person has, we just found this out because he has damage to a fence, and so we can actually see from my property in, has these Tupperware containers that have pipes coming out. This is where these cats are going. Spring, summer, fall, and in the dead of winter. It's inhumane. I've talked to multiple vets. It is inhumane for what is going on with these animals. I've received death threats now because I was on the news from individuals about the cats. And until you are living it, you don't understand. When I walk outside my front yard and it's a litter box. It's horrible. I won't let my grandchildren come to my house because there are all of these cats. My neighbors are fed up. They've been reaching out to Nick, trying to get help as well. I was literally stopped while I was walking one of the puppies by one of the neighbors that I had not met, because I can't spend any real quality time outside because of these cats. The neighbor stopped me and said, "What do we need to do? How can we help?" Because they're fed up and they have small children. So again, I just want to applaud the board for finally doing something. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this ordinance will put some teeth into our ability to do something. So if somebody is feeding the feral cats, they can and will be cited for doing that. Now, that doesn't necessarily remove the cats right away, but it's
But
a
it's a
step.
start, and if they're not feeding them, the cats are going to start looking for, you know,
Elsewhere.
Yeah.
and hopefully not be congregated in one area. The animal control officer came to my home not long after I had been there. He called me, and at that time we had probably 33 cats. He counted them. And he was there at approximately 8 in the morning, and he said that the neighbor had cookie sheets full of food. So the other issue that has brought on with the feeding of all these cats is that I have a family of groundhogs, skunks. My daughter and her husband came home this spring because I was being inundated by groundhogs. They put out live traps. All they caught was these raccoons. For over a month, they were coming home every weekend, and that was what they were was just these raccoons, and we were taking them to Wildwood and releasing them. But all of these other animals are coming because there's food. There's this general, you know, and they're leaving it out. So, you know, again, I just want to applaud the board for finally doing something, because as a homeowner and a taxpayer, if I can't go out and enjoy my yard, and that is the reason I bought my house, was for my yard. So, and again, I explained to some of these people that I've, you know, received commentary from, is that I've done everything that I can reasonably do to try and deter them from my property, chasing them, squirt guns, hose, you name it. These repellents that do not work, do not recommend them. They're very expensive. These liquid repellents, they don't do anything. At least not for this group of cats. They're immune to it or what have you. But when you're trying to do everything, I feel sorry for the cats. I've talked to the vet. What can we do? Well, nothing, because they're feral cats. Something that the board may want to consider, and I have no idea how it would be done, is that there's a lot of rental properties in this township. And with those rental properties, when people move and they're going into another rental property, if they're not allowing pets, they're releasing these poor animals. And that's a travesty. Having a pet is a huge responsibility, and it's not their fault, but we need to do something as humane for these animals. But it's got to start with taking care of how the problem is initiating. But again, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wolf, will we put this on the agenda next week?
No, you have to advertise, Steve.
Advertise
It
it.
would have to be,
Not less than 7 days.
right, so we won't get it on until first meeting in November.
Okay, so first meeting in November, then if it gets passed, then it would be 5 days after that it would go into
Correct.
act. Okay. I just wanted to let everybody know so they weren't calling tomorrow, so, okay.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, I'm Mike Rumberger. I'm at 568 Wellington Road. I want to agree with the previous resident that the feral cat problem in this township is quite horrendous, but I'm also going to agree with Mr. Judd in the fact that I don't believe that new ordinances are necessary in this township. Just stopping feeding feral cats is not going to fix our issue. Cats are great hunters, and if we stop feeding the cats, the one exception to this is bird feeders, feeding squirrels, chipmunks. These cats are just going to go after those animals. And then you're going to get just as many complaints that, hey, now the cats are coming at my bird feeders and things like that. I would highly suggest that the township look at our neighboring communities such as Steelton Borough, townships of Susquehanna, Derry, Swatara, where they have a very good trap and neuter program. In my neighborhood, we've done that. In the last 10 years, we've gone from, I don't even know how many cats there are, to just one in our neighborhood anymore. So I think we do a really disservice to the township if we just put in a new ordinance saying, hey, don't feed the feral cats. I agree with every other animal in there. I know there's problems with skunks and whatever else, but the feral cats are a very specific thing. They are incredible hunters. They are very resilient. If we just stop feeding them, we have many people within the township who are trapping the cats, getting them neutered. If we stop feeding, those people no longer have any way to trap those cats anymore and try and stop this. We need to come up with a plan rather than dealing with a symptom that's out there. Okay, thank you.
Well, let's see what happens, I mean, I can't imagine, and it covers deer as well, I can't imagine a justification for feeding feral cats. What is the justification?
I don't see how neutering will make them less
Well,
hungry.
let me just, maybe I'm missing something. Why would we allow,
I feed cats simply because I don't want them chasing my birds and killing the birds that aren't my feeders. It's an ecological issue there.
but I have bird feeder, but I don't have a lot of cats around because
Okay.
my neighbors aren't feeding the cats. I have the bird feeder right out my window. I love looking at it.
I didn't bring the cats. The cats are already there, as they are in many neighborhoods throughout the township. This isn't a new issue.
But if they,
I mean, her
will they
point of
leave if
people
there's,
just
will they
dropping off
leave? I
cats.
don't know. This is new to me. I'm
Okay.
new. Will they leave if there's no food?
Well, they may go, but they're not going to go more than a
Yeah.
block or two until they find a new food source, which is.
You mean
usually-
until someone feeds them or if they,
Or they find bird feeders, people leaving out, they'll start going through trash. They'll go through everything else.
but they're obviously going to disperse. If somebody's
Sure, but
not
they're
feeding them
gonna
trays
leave
of
our
food.
Township. They're going to stay within, they're not going to go traveling 10 miles away to find new
We
food
just don't
sources.
want them congregating around one or two properties who didn't ask for them to be there.
Well, I think we should also look at those people. I know you should talk to the codes enforcement officer. I'm not sure why that doesn't violate some of the codes within the township. Maybe we need to adjust those.
That's what we're doing.
Maybe talking to
Yeah.
these people
That's what we're
about.
That's
doing,
what we're
trying to
doing.
adjust that.
Good.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about if you're going to feed the cats, you should also be responsible for getting them neutered.
That was my next question. You said you're trapping and getting them spayed and neuter. Who's paying for that?
Me personally.
Okay, and in the other townships, do you know who's paying for that? Are the residents
Some
paying
of
for
it's,
that?
most of the townships have created a 501c3 nonprofit organization, volunteers within the township, but there's usually some funds that come from the townships. You would have to talk to them personally. Steelton gives money, correct? They at least gave a building and a suite, correct? I'm sorry. I'm going
All
back
this
like
creates just another government program and expense where, even if you spay and neuter them and you put them back and you still keep feeding them, they're going to stay.
But they're not going to expand.
Well, they might not expand, but they're still going to be there. I had a gentleman call me the week before last. His neighbor's feeding cats. The cats overran his yard. His grandkids came in covered in cat excrement. And worse, the cats urinated in his air conditioning system and his whole house filled up with cat urine smell. Now, why should anybody have to go through that?
Oh, I'm not
I mean,
disagreeing
that-
there isn't an issue.
this
but I
person
think
is-
the
this person
issue
is
of
paid for his
Just
house.
saying, let's not feed them is not a solution. It's just trying to put a Band-Aid on a symptom.
Well, let's see. Are they being fed for the sole purpose of attracting them so they can be neutered?
Some of them, but the ones that I neuter, I then take care of and feed them so they do not have to find alternative sources. food, for example, the birds.
But they're wild animals. They're supposed to be looking for
But
alternative
that's not
sources of
true. I
food.
just heard that, people leaving apartments or just throwing their cats out on the street. These are not all feral cats. These are stray cats. For example, 3 weeks ago, I received a call from the police department asking me to check on a cat on an abandoned property. I went there, found the cat. It was a little kitten. Took the kitten to the vet, got it all the shots and whatever else at my own expense, passed it off to a rescue, and the rescue is going to adopt it out to another organization. So this is not all feral cats, but we can't identify which are feral, which are just stray cats.
Well, I'm glad I have a cat. I love cats. I care for my cat. I love spaying and neutering and all that. But let's see how this works. We can't allow what is happening to our residents to continue to go on. We can't. That's with this quality of life. We
This
can't.
draft is from the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and they're referring to non-domestic felines. I would think that if they were being maintained, they'd be a domestic feline. If they're being thrown out, they're a non-domestic feline. That's directly from the Game Commission. That's their definition.
Let's see how it works.
And I understand that that's the game commission. I don't consider cats game unless you hunt cats or eat cats or anything else, because that's still legal in Pennsylvania.
Well, just because the term is game commission, but, personally, I look at this as a public health issue.
So do
And I can say that the first time somebody comes in here and their child or grandchild or other family member has become seriously ill because of contamination by feral cats, then I, for one, would be for taking much more dramatic action, such as trap and relocate or trap and humanely euthanize. We just simply cannot allow cats to overrun people's property and cover it with excrement. That is a health hazard, and nothing against cats, although I am a dog person rather than the cat person, but nothing against cats, and I don't want them to be treated inhumanely, but they cannot be allowed to overrun property and create a health hazard for people. That simply cannot be allowed to exist. And somebody has spent how much money buying a house and maintaining the property, and they pay property taxes, and they can't even go outside. I think their quality of life trumps allowing the cats to just roam free wherever they want.
And again, at no point did I ever disagree with that. What I'm saying is that we come up with a better plan than just, hey, let's stop feeding them. Let's try and reduce the
Well, I'm not sure what the better plan is. The
We
trap.
need to reduce the population, because
Well-
right now, the population is not going to reduce.
Well,
They're
those.
just going to keep reproducing.
Let's see what happens.
Let's see
Maybe
what-
we'll have to revisit it.
And that could be an additional component, to this. But that is something that takes a considerable period of time, and is not overly effective. So really, the cats need to be removed. Now, where we take them is the $64,000 question there, and how you deal with them. But you just simply. So what? This lady's supposed to wait through 4 or 5 generations of cats for them to sort of peter out?
Well, we're
I mean,
not-
that's not fair to her.
I understand that, but if we just stop feeding them, they're not going anywhere.
Well, they have to go
They're still going to be
somewhere.
within the township. I don't think we're going to see a
Maybe they'll go to
difference in
Swatara Township. That's
Last year, we had a local doctor come in, a veterinarian, and she was willing, if you brought them out to her doctor's office, she was willing to spay and neuter for free. And it was, our meeting was on television, hopefully but obviously it wasn't working.
There are several groups within the area, the Humane Society, Nobody's Cat Foundation, all provide low-cost spay and neutering for just outdoor cats, not
That-
your home cat or whatever else. I would really suggest speaking to especially Stilton Borough. They've had an incredibly successful program in their town, in their borough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to add a comment where you said about relocating the cats.
Mhm.
That will not solve the problem. New cats will move into the township.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but we have to reduce the population of feral cats. We simply have to do it.
And that is done by TNR. because so many cats are having 4 and 5 litters of kittens every year. So one cat can have 20 kittens in this, over a couple months.
TNR's trap and release.
Yeah, trap, neuter,
All right, well,
release.
why does one prohibit the other? Why would this ordinance prevent people from trapping and release?
It doesn't.
Because you're not allowing them to feed them. You have to feed them to get them to go into the trap.
But the feeding is impacting other people. It's not just impacting the people who are feeding them, it's impacting their neighbors.
I understand that.
Okay, so it's not.
And it's still gonna, again, like my husband said, it's just gonna be a Band-Aid. It's just gonna, they're gonna go into trash. It's just gonna still become a health hazard.
Well, we'll see. If we have to revisit it, we will, but let's just try.
I think you make a good point that there is likely more than one strategy that's going to have to be employed here, but I think this ordinance is one of the strategies. However, trap and release, I think, is something that, yes, should be done.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Derek Lyon. I live on 6264 Elmer Avenue. I also came out here tonight because I was concerned about the text of the proposed ordinance regarding the feeding of wild animals. One question I do want to just put out there, it doesn't have to be answered right away, but so I don't forget, is we mentioned that the language was modeled on Game Commission language. I was curious if we had, in this proposed ordinance, made any modifications or if this was lock, stock, and barrel. But the problem is that feeding bans are impractical, and they do punish the people in the community who, at their expense, and I think some of those people are here tonight, who are working to improve conditions for both the cats and the community. Now, listening to Ms. Henney was very informative. I have heard of some of her issues, and my heart absolutely goes out to her. I can't imagine being in the situation that she's in. It does sound to me, and this is just perspective of an outsider, I don't live in her neighborhood, that there is a severe problem here, and that perhaps the general solution that's being proposed township-wide is not appropriate. Feeding bans don't work, and they are not scientifically supported. As the previous speakers mentioned, the cats will find alternate sources of food. It'll be your trash cans. It'll be the songbirds that a lot of people have an issue with. They are scavengers, and not feeding them is just going to create a new problem. One of the things that I had heard one of the supervisors suggest is that if the cats are moved out of the area, that if the cats are no longer fed, that they will move out of the area. It will encourage them to disperse, but just to underscore what was said previously, they're not going anywhere. And if we were to take an extreme solution, and I know nobody has suggested that as one this evening to euthanize animals, let's say the absolute most extreme solution, it is just a vacuum that will quickly be refilled. This is something that you might be interested in, from a administrative standpoint. These types of things are difficult to enforce. Now, with some of the neighbors that some of the people in this room have, sure, there's somebody you could go after, but in general, people are compassionate, as I know you all are, in talking about the animals. They're going to continue doing what they're doing, and I feel like the township is potentially setting itself up for something that is going to be very difficult to enforce. And I did hear Supervisor Judd, I think what you had said, let's try this. I would suggest, like the previous speaker said, that we, instead of trying something from an ordinance perspective, we first talk to the experts in the area, of which I'm not. I'm not an expert, I'm just somebody who likes cats. Let's see what they have to say about things before we put something down, as a law. And I think that probably 2 more points. Feeding bans ignore the real problem, which is the lack of affordable spay and neuter services in the community. There are, as one of the supervisors mentioned, opportunities for low-cost spay and neuter. But if you're talking about a cat colony, even a low-cost option could quickly get very expensive. And as the previous speaker suggested, we do have other townships in the area that work with the Stilton Community Cats, I believe it is, and they have found that to be very effective. One final point that I just wanted to make real quick, and then if you had any questions that I might be able to answer just from the reading that I've done. The health issue, that's a big issue, especially if you've got kids, and we've heard stories about that tonight. The interesting thing, and I didn't know this until I looked it up, is that most diseases that infect cats can only be spread from cat to cat, and that you are much more likely to catch the disease from a person standing in front of you at a grocery store than you are from a cat. Rabies in cats, it's really not an issue. The last confirmed cat-to-human transmission of rabies was in 1975. Regarding the disease that can be carried in cat feces, they're animals, they are going to, and it is a problem, but you would literally have to touch it and somehow ingest it for it to be an issue. Now, maybe with children, maybe that is an issue. The majority of cases of toxoplasmosis, which is the predominant thing that's transmitted in cat feces, you're more likely to get it from food that you're eating than you are from a cat. So I just wanted to come tonight and suggest that we don't take an action without evaluating, the potential solutions. TNR, trap, neuter, and release, or there may be another word, is the one proven thing that does work. And anything that we do short of that, I think is doomed to failure. And for people like Miss Henny, I want a solution for her, and I think she's got an extreme situation. Trap, neuter, release would never support somebody having 30 to 40 cats, in a neighborhood. The idea is to get the cats to congregate in an area where it doesn't affect the community, and that's what TNR can offer. Thank you.
I'd like to rebut this.
But you have to
Please come to the podium.
Okay, I'm sorry, but trap, neuter, and release does not work for this exact scenario that we have in Lower Paxton Township. This is the problem that we have, is that you have these people, yes, they may go get some of them trap, neutered, but they're releasing them right back in the same neighborhood. So you have these individuals that are feeding them. The cats don't stay where they're being fed. They then go through the neighborhood. I have literally trails through my yard from the cats. I've worked with multiple veterinarians that have been out to my house. They're overwhelmed. The health issues, I have medullary thyroid cancer and have been in remission for 5.5 years. I have a lower compromised immune system. The cats are a problem because of that. One of the new puppies that I had just gotten, and I got my puppies and got one, and several weeks later got the other. Puppy was checked out at the vet when I got puppy. 2 weeks later, when I am in at Noah's Ark, Dr. Simmons, we do a fecal test of the puppy. The puppy had what's called coccidia, which is a parasite. 90% sure it was from the cat feces. Dr. Simmons confirmed this for me because that was my first question asked. How did we have a healthy puppy that everything had been done, and literally 2 weeks after I take this puppy home, this puppy is sick? So the fence had just gone up, and I was getting all of this stuff out of the yard, but apparently I had missed something because this is what it was. So it does pose health issues, not only to humans, but if you have other animals. Okay? I have done everything that I can possibly do to deter these cats from my yard. As a taxpayer and a homeowner, I should be able to go into my yard and not worry about walking through cat feces. I should be able to have my grandchildren come to my home where I'm not scared to let them go outside because one of these cats is going to attack them, which has happened. Before I moved to this township, I lived on a 200-acre farm. I had barn cats, which are exactly the same thing as feral cats. We didn't feed the feral cats. the barn cats. They fed themselves. There was never more than 3 cats on my farm at any one time. But when you have a neighbor that's putting cookie sheets full of food, now not only do we have the cats, but we have the groundhogs, and we have the skunks, and we have the raccoons, and we have all of the other animals that are coming along with it. As far as the trash is concerned, Lower Paxton Township, we have an issue with bears. So there's already an ordinance in place that you must secure your trash can. You need to secure your bird feeders at night and not leave them out. So there are already things in place as far as that is concerned. But if you're just putting your garbage outside, that's a whole other issue. We need to have a discussion about proper waste containers and that such. But the cats, I'm sorry, I'm an animal lover. But this is beyond any scope. I had people that were here at the last meeting that, oh, we'll come to your house, we'll do this, we'll do that. They were there one time, haven't seen them back since. So when you're feeding these cats, unless you're gonna put them in a pen in your yard and keep them there, no, doesn't work, and neither does trap, neuter, and release. Not when you're releasing them right back into the same neighborhood and I'm being affected, or my neighbor or my neighbor's children are being affected. It does not work. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, unless somebody has other comments, I think we've heard both sides of this issue, and we have the proposed ordinance, so unless there's objection from the board, I think we should go forward and advertise it, and then we'll put it on the appropriate meeting for final discussion. Okay, number 11, George, there's something we ought to know.
Actually, I have 2 items for you this evening, board members. The first of which is that the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code has been amended. The synopsis of that amendment is that the International Code Council's 2015 model code replaces the 2009 code. So the state of Pennsylvania and all municipalities therein are going to, as of April 1st of 2019, have to enforce the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code and the 2015 code of the International Code Council. I could go through the specific amendments that are in this rendition. I can tell you, none of us will understand them. So.
I'm getting a lot of no
I agree.
from this side of the table.
Aren't a lot of them had to do with increasing things aimed at whether energy,
Increasing energy compliance, absolutely, yes.
We could have George verbatim read them all if you would.
No.
My one concern is typically when this
I'll
happens,
take that as a no, Mr. Chrisman.
board members may get information from a builder or a homeowner who has said, hey, I did this before and now I can't do it, or I have to do it differently. We have a new code. We don't have to take any action. Our ordinance adopts successive amendments of the code as issued by the state. So no action necessary by the township. The second item of interest I have, board members, is in regard to wireless legislation. And there is Pennsylvania House Bill 2564, which many of the municipal organizations are having heartburn with. This legislation does 2 things. It preempts municipal zoning authority when it comes to small wireless facilities. These are basically facilities that could be installed on a utility pole. And we do have them in Lower Paxton Township now as I speak. It also drastically reduces the fees that municipalities can charge for these facilities. I know that our state association and the Pennsylvania Municipal League of Cities have both spoken in opposition to the bill, not in opposition to legislating wireless facilities, but preempting municipal zoning and restricting municipalities and their ability to generate fees. Board members, I really don't have a position myself in regard to this. I know our Council of Governments has at least forwarded information, and so has our state association. If the board was interested in taking any action, as in supporting further amendment of House Bill 2564, such correspondence could be drafted.
And just as a note, the correspondence had indicated a vote is imminent. As far as I can tell, unless they've moved this into another bill, it went into a House committee, hasn't come out of a House committee. It would have to go out of committee through the House and then to the Senate, which is meeting for one more week. So it has a long ways to go, and then the session's over, and everything goes back to square one. But it's good to have this on our radar.
Absolutely. Okay. That would take us to improvement guarantees, of which
We have
one. We have a motion to accept the improvement guarantee.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the one improvement guarantee for a new letter of credit.
Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No? Any other comments?
Yeah, I just have a couple here. Last Thursday, the board attended the Dauphin County Association of the Township of Conference on Thursday night. Saturday, we also attended the open house for the Colonial Park Fire Company. And with that said, this is Fire Prevention Week, so if you stop by your local firehouse, I would appreciate you would all go and thank the volunteers who put in loads of time fighting fires during the night when we're sleeping and all the training that they have to do. So thank you to Paxtonia, Linglestown, and Colonial Park for taking care of our residents in Lower Paxton Township.
And being Fire Prevention Week, check your fire systems at home.
Yep. Change your alarms twice a year.
This
Your
is the time.
batteries.
This is the week to change your batteries.
Yep.
Any other board member comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you.